Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's show. My name is Spencer Walsh. Thank you so much for joining us here on this Monday episode of the show. And that's right, folks. We are starting off once again by talking about Israel. I mean, I'm starting to question how much we're talking about this, but it's pretty big news. It's really kind of reaching its peak at this point. The streets are ablaze. The parliament there is ablaze all over this judicial reform bill. We will touch on that. Also, some really pretty crazy numbers released today by the New York Times of a study of elite schools, who gets into them based on race, based on academics, based on parental income, which I think is very, very interesting. Something that a lot of people maybe wouldn't quite expect. Also, we are taking a look today at the UPS strike looming as corporate America prepares to cash in, and we will take a big look at how the negotiations are going, what are some of the demands, and what the future will be for the Democratic Party, and a very interesting primary challenge developing against Lizzie Fletcher in a recently withdrawn Texas district, 7th Congressional District of Texas. And it really is going up against one of the biggest challengers to left-wing insurgents in the recent years, the Dark Money AIPAC group. We will break that down for the end of the show. It's something very important you're going to want to stay tuned for. And just a quick programming note there, we are going to switch around those two last stories. So we're going to be doing the UPS one first, the UPS one last, and the Democratic challenger second. And I got a great labor notes piece on that for you. But anyway, we are starting at the top with some discussions of Israel. Some really interesting stuff. Protesters are apparently blocking roads, lighting bonfires, and police are responding with water cannons and unintentionally burning tires, which is actually what the Palestinians used to do, and probably still do, to protect from Israeli snipers targeting their civilians and children from, flammable rocks. I guess that was the charge of what they were doing. Molotov cocktails coming over the border to these IDF snipers. But it is a very interesting dynamic coming out in Israel at the moment. So obviously coming at the cost, we talked about this, catch up a little bit on the show, essentially from yesterday. But what is going on essentially is the drive in Israel to essentially give more power to the right-wing elected government of Benjamin Netanyahu away from what is said to be the more centrist, more moderate check on the government, which is the Supreme Court there. And they passed this in the parliament, which limited the Supreme Court's ability to overturn decisions made by government ministers, something that really, again, a lot of people freaked out about. Again, here in the New York Times, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was hospitalized to receive a pacemaker over the weekend, had sought to quell intensifying unrest in a televised address to the Israeli people on Monday evening. Speaking from his office, he suggested that he would table until late November a broader judicial overhaul. So they're still not done. So they still want to keep going here. I say, have at it, go for it. It's kind of a let them fight situation, because it really, again, it's hard as hell to feel a lot of sympathy for these kind of liberal Zionists as they, cry and wail about how all their rights are being taken away in the midst of, rampant Palestinian settlements, mistreatments of the Palestinian population all around them. Very, very hard to feel that much sympathy, again, as we see, people being evicted by force from their homes by random people. Again, people who have lived in these homes for generations. And scenes broadcast live on Israel's public broadcaster. Demonstrators gathered near the Supreme Court in Jerusalem, waving Israeli flags. Some protesters yelled, "For shame," as the police fired water cannons at them. Elsewhere in the country, demonstrators burned tires, and a truck drove into protesters on a highway in Israel, injuring 3. So I don't know if that truck was, I don't think that truck was a military truck. But again, when they start sniping protesters from a security fence that the Israeli government builds, then you can call me. Then you can start complaining. But until then, I'm not too freaked out about it. In scenes broadcast live on Israel's public broadcaster, demonstrators gathered near the Supreme Court but the country's nationalist right was celebrating the passage of the law, which had kind of become a stand-in for deeper rifts in Israel between those who want a more secular and pluralist state with those who want a more religious and nationalist vision. Again, talking about this double-sided, this dichotomy of, people who, again, both want to get that same goal of a completely Jewish Israel. They want to get to, a place where really Jews have a lot of the power, but maybe have some gay Jews, maybe have some Jews from other ethnic backgrounds. But you don't have a lot of Arabs playing in very much beyond a kind of a token role in the society. But talk about pluralist. Most importantly, though, it is an advertisement. It's a projection to the rest of the world. While 70% of Israelis support 70+% of Israelis support people inside the borders of what is today Israel proper, not the settlements, obviously the Gaza Strip or anything like that. Israel proper, they are intensely supportive of the bombing campaigns, of the mowing the grass policy, of the settlement policy, of all some of the worst, or kind of the nation state law of 2018, which is all these various rules to kind of oppress the physically attack attack the civil rights, attack in every which way possible. The freedom of the Palestinians to do, to kind of exist in a country they have existed for so long. And with that being said, it is, it gets to be a pretty interesting situation where, we have to, feel sorry for these people. And, when they are really projecting this BS vision to the rest of the world. Whenever you hear some of these people, these liberal Zionists, they will, push for these things, as a projection, again, to the outside. Really see a lot of them, at least based in Israel, but with deep ties to the United States. Some of them are in the United States. They are, very invested in saying things like, there's Arabs serving in the Knesset, we're the safe harbor for gay people in the Middle East, and all that kind of stuff. All these, two or three same moral points that they keep going to for the United States, for most, again, the United States audience that, the Democrats essentially, it's pretty much to get the Democratic Party to support Israel as much as the Republican Party. And then you got, the Itamar Ben-Gvirs of the world who are saying, with God's help, this will be just the beginning. So ultra-nationalist minister. So again, it's really, those are the people who are saying, full steam ahead. Let's make this an Israel for the Jewish Israelis and nobody else. And we don't care how we sound about it or how we go about it. We're just going to do it. That is the other side of this situation. So lawmakers passed the measure 64-0 on Monday after opposition members walked out of the chamber. Boycotting a vote they had no chance of winning, as Netanyahu's governing coalition holds a slim majority in the 120-member parliament. Demonstrators massed outside the parliament, chanted and banged on barricades as the vote took place. An alliance of 150 major businesses, including the country's biggest malls, shuttered their doors before the voting began. More than 10,000 military reservists are threatening to resign from duty, but so far the protests have not risen to the level of those that roiled the country in March, when Israel's defense minister was fired after urging a halt to the judicial reform effort. Yair Lapid, centrist leader of the opposition, said Netanyahu's offer was not credible because he was in the clutches of hard-line members of his coalition who reject any compromise. The extremist and messianic government cannot tear our democracy to shreds at noon and in the evening, said Netanyahu, to say that he offers negotiations. We won't give up. The struggle has just begun. So it's hard to really, get too worked up about this because, it's hard to, I think the hand-wringing liberals here, the liberal Zionists, I guess you could say, have not really done a very good job of at least communicating to me. From what I've seen, I've been following this, and we've been following this here on the show pretty closely, but it's very hard to get a sense of what they're actually talking about. It's really hard to get a sense of what the worst case scenario. Like when we talked about Trump, at least Trump and Russia, that was a BS situation from back to front, right? But we knew at least exactly what the crime was. We knew what the worst case scenario was. Trump working with Russia to influence the Democratic election, tilt the scales in the favor of the Republican Party. But this is actually happening, and we don't know what's gonna we don't know what the worst case scenario is. We don't know, are they going to use it to I don't know, kill all Palestinians? Are they going to, start an invasion and, stop the Supreme Court from overturning it? Are they going to, make it's very hard to see them doing something, this right-wing government, that a large portion of, and the Supreme Court not being able to stop it, that a large portion of the people of Israel will not just support anyway. But, there's no disputing there certainly is a very, very big reaction. So with that being said, we will continue to follow the story, and let's go to the next one. All right. We have some very interesting numbers coming out of the New York Times today. Upshot. They write, elite colleges have long been filled with the children of the richest families. At Ivy League schools, 1 in 6 students have parents in the top 1%. A large new study released on Monday shows that it has not been because these children had more impressive grades or average, or they took harder classes. They tended to have higher SAT scores and finally honed resumes and applied at a higher rate. And yeah, so this is not too much of a surprise here. This is kind of the structural advantages that make it easier for you to come to college, but they were overrepresented even after accounting for those things. For applicants with the same SAT or ACT scores, children from families in the top 1% were 34% more likely to be admitted than the average applicant and those from the top 0.1% were more than twice as likely to get in, which is really kind of remarkable. As you can see, there's this kind of graph here that they put up. It's been all over the kind of social media over the world. Twitter, I guess X now, whatever you want to call it. The study by Opportunity Insights, a group of economists based at Harvard who study inequality, quantifies for the first time the extent to which being very rich is its own qualification in selective college admission. So it kind of goes very interesting. It starts off as you're a little bit more likely to be admitted if you're kind of very, very poor. Then you're a little bit less likely to be admitted if you're rich to upper middle class. But then if you're super, super rich, 90th percentile, 92nd percentile really onwards, the 99.9 percentile, you're up to 2.2 times likelier in the top 0.1%. So yeah, again, this new data shows that among students with the same test scores, the college gave preferences to the children of alumni and recruited athletes, and gave children from private schools higher non-academic ratings. Very interesting there. The private school advantage in terms of how easy it is for you to kind of slide your way into colleges. This result is the clearest picture yet of how America's elite colleges perpetuate the intergenerational transfer of wealth and opportunity. What I conclude from the study is that Ivy League doesn't have low-income students because it doesn't want low-income students, said Susan Dynarski, who's an economist at the Harvard Graduate School of Education, who has reviewed the data and was not involved in the study. The study shows these policies amounted to affirmative action for children of the 1%, whose parents earn more than $611,000 a year. It comes as colleges are being forced to rethink their admissions process after the Supreme Court ruling that affirmative action, race-based affirmative action, is unconstitutional. So yeah, very, very interesting stuff. That it's not even just with the same SAT score. It's you're coming down to things like just being from a private school, being a legacy. You're so and the things even like high rates of application, SAT scores, better grades, whatever, because of better academic opportunities, better quality schools, whatever. All those things have been adjusted for, and at the end of the day, you are still coming out to a advantage for the rich. This is a kind of very interesting quote here, I thought. Raj Chetty, who's an economist at Harvard and who directs this Opportunity Insights and author of the paper along with John Friedman and David Deming of Brown and Harvard, respectively, saying, are these highly selective private colleges in America taking kids from very high-income influential families and basically channeling them to remain at the top in the next generation, said Raj Chetty, an economist at Harvard. Flipping that question on its head, could we potentially diversify who's in a position of leadership in our society by changing who's admitted? Well, seems like it makes sense. Representatives from several of the colleges said that income diversity was an urgent priority. They'd taken significant steps from 2015 when the data in the study ends to admit lower income and first generation students. These include making tuition free for families earning under a certain amount, giving only grants, not loans, and financial aid, and actively recruiting students from disadvantaged high schools, which I think is, those type of things are going to go a long way in, when it comes down to it, making college way more towards what it's supposed to be. It has to be less of kind of prestigious commodity, because it creates this thing of, everyone wants to get it, everyone's getting it more and more. But as we see, the rich are getting it more and more. So not only is it this thing that really only the rich can have, but since more and more people are going to it, at the lower levels, not at these elite colleges, the people, the kind of quote unquote middle class drivers who are going to these middling colleges are becoming numerous and numerous, while the richer, more prestigious colleges are becoming more elite and more elite. So those colleges, those middling colleges, are becoming less and less valuable, where the higher education colleges are becoming more and more valuable and more out of reach and more expensive because of all of these things when it comes to the income distribution and income diversity. And that is taking away from a true leg up, the true investment, the true pathway to the American dream, owning a house, all that stuff of what college is supposed to be in American society. So if we really take steps to get to that point, if we take steps to kind of get a better sense of, in terms of equality, in terms of just whether it be whatever race you are, going to these disadvantaged high schools, and obviously that I think is going to do a long way to replace a lot of what affirmative action, or the removal of affirmative action, brought, and kind of bring back more racial diversity. But it's also going to expose people of different income backgrounds to each other. It's going to I think make the world a lot more of a better functioning place, and it's also going to do a lot to kind of expand the middle class and give these people who previously had much more of a harder time going to college, a hard time imagining themselves going to college. They were going to get into these top tier schools a lot easier if these policies really kind of catch on, and then that is going to allow them to get into more middle class, even upper class type of jobs, which I think is going to be a very, very positive thing for just the health of our society in general. But when it comes down to it, obviously these colleges cannot be trusted to kind of run their own asylum here. It needs to be the government stepping in, saying, we need to stop you guys from, stealing all the money endowments for yourselves, and just blowing a bunch of smoke up our ass about how we're going to, make things so diverse and, spend all this money on our students, and make sure that we're, extending all these opportunities to people of, low income backgrounds, all that kind of stuff, first generation college students, all that stuff, and we're going to make sure you come in and actually do it at a very standardized level. Whole thing just needs to be reimagined. I think that there is the bottom line. All right, very, very big and very, very important story coming up next. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for listening and supporting Newsflash. We now have a brand new way for you to be heard if you want, whether a text message or a audio message. Please, no video messages. I really just do not think that's necessary. We have a new feedback box open for you. Ladies and gentlemen, it is officially open. SWRN702@gmail.com. Send a text message, send a voice message of no more than 30 seconds via the voice memos function. Either of those two options, and we will 100%, not going to find this guarantee anywhere else. We're going to play it on the show, listen to what you have to say, and it literally could be about anything. Well, if it's inappropriate, we won't play it, but it could be about anything. Thank you so much. This is my thank you to all the listeners who have stuck out with us and want to have their own voice in the show. SWRN702@gmail.com is the address. All right, so very, very interesting report here by Ryan Grimm. Coming out to all about this kind of Justice Democrats type, left-wing, economically left, socially left, kind of challenging the Democratic Party essentially from the left here, who is doing it in Texas. I believe there's been a challenger that we've covered in the past in this district against Representative Lizzie Fletcher, who's definitely towards the right of the Democratic caucus, that is for sure. And it really is interesting because it involves one of the biggest challengers, one of the groups that's been one of the biggest obstacles to, especially over the last 2 cycles or so, and some of the specials like Nina Turner in Ohio. I think it's really been it's been quite clear that one of the biggest problems has been AIPAC. Frankly, it's the American Israel something lobby. It's the Israel lobby in America, and by extension, their sub-PAC, Democratic Majority for Israel, which essentially goes into these races where the opponent to the AIPAC supported pro-Israel, often right-wing on a whole really host of other issues, economic, social, whatever, they also support Israel. They will come in, spend boatloads of money against the progressive challenger, who's, again, not just on the left on Israel, but a whole host of other things, and also run ads that really have nothing to do with Israel. In the Nina Turner race is a great example. She was running against, she's a kind of Bernie Sanders acolyte, I think it's fair to say, running against Chantel Brown, who's a kind of Democratic establishment politician in the Cleveland area. And none of them really had big positions on Israel, but Nina Turner had come in the past. She was a Bernie Sanders type supporter. She'd made statements relatively pro-Palestine in the past, but it was far from her thing. It was far from what she was running her campaign on. DMFI comes in, endorses Chantel Brown, spends tons of money, not really talking about Israel, talking about how Nina Turner, because she said voting for Biden is like voting for half a bowl of shit or whatever, comes in, spends tons of ads saying Nina Turner is an unloyal Democrat, loses the race, and you can see that's repeatable over a lot of different races. Summer Lee was another victim of this, but she actually was able to survive and pull through. But now we have someone who is challenging an AIPAC-backed supporter and says he is not afraid of it, which I found to be very interesting. So Ryan Grimm writes, the House of Representatives embarked on its semi-regular bipartisan ritual of pausing legislative business to condemn critics of Israel and celebrate the nation's virtues. The only twist is that a congressional resolution put up for a vote on Tuesday does less to hail Israel's more benign qualities, but this time focused on rebutting the reality that it is, in its present incarnation, a racist apartheid state. The latest controversy began on a few Saturdays back in Chicago at the annual Netroots Nation conference, a gathering of progressive operatives and politicians. During a panel protest, protesters came for Representative Jan Schakowsky, urging her to support legislation that bars Israel from using U.S. funds to detain children. Pramila Jayapal of Washington stood up to respond to the protesters, and in doing so agreed that with their claim that Israel is a racist state. As Jayapal later told the New York Times' Michelle Goldberg, she knew as she walked off stage she'd stepped in it. The state may be stacked with profoundly racist ministers, some of whom had previously been convicted of inciting racism and supporting terrorism against Arabs, and the state may legally treat different people under its control differently based on their religion and ethnicity, which is actual fact. Look at the nation-state law of 2018 and a bunch of other cases, dubbed by the Amnesty International Group as an apartheid state, which is, again, Human Rights Watch as well. Pick your poison in terms of B'Tselem, Israeli human rights group, saying we are an apartheid state, essentially. But bluntly calling it a racist state runs into a thick lattice of taboos, which is, that is a great way of putting it. Jayapal quickly walked back her remarks, but a bipartisan group of colleagues circulated a letter condemning her anyway and pushed for the resolution in response. Because, let's be clear, we cannot have the slightest criticism of Israel if it's not followed up by a resolution proclaiming, oh, we're so sorry, it's not a racist state, it's just the best. The resolution is striking in its brevity, resolved by the House of Representatives that it is the sense of the Congress that the state of Israel is not a racist or apartheid state. Congress rejects all forms of anti-Semitism and xenophobia. And the United States will always be a staunch supporter of and partner of Israel. 9 Democrats voted no. Jamal Bowman, Andre Carson, Summer Lee, AOC, Ilhan Omar, Anna Presley, Delia Ramirez, and Rashida Tlaib won. Betty McCollum voted president. Jayapal voted for this resolution. The pushback against Jayapal is an escalation of a confrontation initially aimed at Omar and Tlaib by Israeli government defenders, which expanded into a full-blown war on progressive candidates in Democratic primaries in 2022. Yeah, and so when it comes down to it, this spending, this money by AIPAC had a pretty big effect on the positions that a lot of these progressive challengers took on Palestinian rights. Say, I don't want to get drowned, I don't want to get swamped. And they really had to deal with a lot of spending anyway. But it still was a very, very big factor. But anyway, though, contrary to the chilling effect AIPAC may be having nationwide, one challenger, an incumbent Democrat in Houston, is taking the polar opposite approach. Pervez Agwan is running against the AIPAC-endorsed Representative Lizzie Fletcher as an unapologetically progressive Democrat and criticizing Fletcher for taking money from AIPAC, hoping to turn any impending spending against him into a weakness for Fletcher. To take money from a lobbying group that dictates your foreign policy, I think that's completely unacceptable, Agwan told Intercept in an interview. I don't think it's okay to take money from a group that openly keeps an apartheid system in an open-air prison where people's rights are violated. Oh, dropping the open-air prison language. That is just some great stuff by Agwan here, and that is exactly what you want to hear. Again, that open air prison line, that's from the UN. It's not from Electronic Intifada. That's from the UN. And it's a really kind of great way of framing it too, because a lot of people, especially in Houston, I think this is where this place is, they don't care about Israel or Palestine. They just really don't. So if you kind of telegraph it to the first layer of defense being, why is Lizzie Fletcher, because, big money in politics, not popular really with anyone, so saying, why are you taking money from this group that's going to dictate your foreign policy? What are they getting for all the money that they're putting into your campaign? That's something that, I think Bernie tried very, very successfully with Hillary Clinton in the Wall Street speeches. That kind of rhetorical trick, not even really a trick, just a question, a logical question that's, kind of getting voters to think about, what is this person really about? Well, when it comes to foreign policy, are they going to be an honest actor? Are they going to have the best interests of me and the district at heart? Or are they going to, go with whatever's best for Israel? And then, just it's a very blue seat, obviously. And then the next line of defense, further question, peel back the layers of the onion. I mean, hey, it's an apartheid state. They're running an open-air prison. I don't want to take money from a group that supports that. So Agwan saw the influence of AIPAC in the response to Jayapal's remarks. Representative Jayapal's remarks are clearly being taken out of context by Democrats and Republicans alike, who refuse to allow criticism of Israel and its actions because of their ties with groups like AIPAC. Really going off here. Respect to this guy. In reality, Israel is an apartheid state that commits atrocities against native Palestinians on a daily basis. That is something that should be criticized, but unfortunately, Republicans and establishment Democrats are too concerned with defending the Israel lobby who bankrolls their campaign to be honest about what's going on. Agwan, a graduate of MIT, who made his career in the clean tech industry, is running on a progressive platform supportive of Green New Deal and Medicare for All, but as a candidate challenging Fletcher from the left, and particularly a Muslim one, Agwan has an additional obstacle to get past. In the 2022 cycle, AIPAC's super PAC spent $40 million, nearly all of it directed at defeating progressive Democrats in primaries. Agwan, who has raised $300,000 with 8 months of campaigning still to go. In the quarter ending in June 30th, he reported raising $221,000. He's running towards some of the problems in AIPAC, which is big respect to him, because they're going to come for you either way. This is also really significant because it's the first time we've really seen, someone who just, I think in politics, just anywhere from the left, whether it's Republicans doing it to Democrats or Democrats doing it to left-wingers, I mean, you really always see whenever there's an attack, whenever there's a push on something like this, they instantly kind of crumble. If it's in a push from the right, they just instantly, with the Democrats or leftists, they just instantly seem to crumble. There's no aggression there's no aggressive response made. There's no saying, this is why it's bad. This is my case. And no, I'm not going to say, oh, I apologize. I support Israel's right to exist. All that, bullshit that we keep getting from these people on a daily basis whenever they're asked about this stuff. No, he's saying they're running an open-air prison. They're creating crime, committing atrocities against the Palestinians on a daily basis. And so, yeah, really respect for him. He's someone who I would donate to in a heartbeat. Because not only is this guy, it seems like, willing to take the right stances on Palestine and Israel, he is somebody who is willing to, on a real level, actually fight powerful interests and not be afraid to make the case against them. See if that can rally support and make a very well thought out, very strategic case against them. Instead of just sitting down and apologizing and saying, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it," it's just like all this kind of stuff is just so pathetic. It goes back to what Primal Jayapal said. We're fighting against an organized opposition here, and we are your friends. But if you cave so many times to that organized opposition, what is really the point of you? And if you're someone like Agwan here, you're actively seeming to look willing to do that, and huge respect to this guy here. So Fletcher has carved out a fairly standard pro-business, pro-Israel, socially liberal record as a Democrat. She joined the New Democrat Coalition, the voice for the corporate wing of the party. In the 2018 Blue Wave, she beat a more progressive candidate in the primary, flipped a red seat blue, and joined the New Democrat Coalition. A corporate attorney by training, she cast reliable Democratic votes in the House, and in 2020, she held on to her three-point margin. Her seat by a 3-point margin against her Republican opponent. In 2018, she faced organized labor opposition to her candidacy based on her work as a partner at Aza Law, which largely represents employers, and won a major case against local janitorial workers represented by the SEIU, who are predominantly immigrants. Aza Law boasted in its effort to attract future business from employers that it won its case in part by studying the social media feeds of the jury pool to make sure the jury was stacked with Donald Trump supporters. I wonder if Lizzie Fletch was digging through those social media feeds looking for build the wall posts. But the case was ideologically motivated to destroy labor. PJS, the Fletcher firm's client, was involved with Empowered Texans, a right-wing group working to undermine organized labor in Texas. She won her race regardless. Union power remains weak in Texas, to say the least. But in the 2022 cycle, she has now been withdrawn to be in a pretty deep blue district. It runs from the middle of Houston West through the wealthy suburb of Bel Air and out to the increasingly diverse areas of Alief and Sugarland. The new district is one of the most, if not the most diverse, in Texas, with nearly 3/4 of the population being non-white, according to census data from 2020, which may, in fact, undercount some of the diversity. 3 in 10 residents are Hispanic, 21% Black, and 22% Asian. She carried the Deep Blue seat by nearly 30 points in 2022. In 2023, she was named the chair of the New Democratic Coalition Trade Task Force. But while the redrawn seat may be safer for Democrats, it may be more unsafe for Fletcher. So he says this campaign, Agwan says, this campaign isn't going to be about me out there. It's about a collective movement. Again, there we go. A little not me, us action. How about that? So he said it's about a collective movement of people here in Houston that are from these communities that are Arab American, Muslim American, and Middle Eastern, and from Palestinian communities. And we recognize the atrocities that are happening there that are funded by the American taxpayer, but also being pushed on us by lobby groups like the ones you just mentioned, in response to a question whether he's nervous about spending from AIPAC or DMFI, the AIPAC associated PAC that's done a lot of this work. So we're not scared. We have to stand up because their presence in our democracy, for that matter, any foreign lobby or corporate lobby's presence in our democracy, is really diluting the power of an average American person. So it's simple. Money in politics is bad. Period. End of story. Don't need to come on a political level. You don't need to confuse voters by talking about, Israel, Palestine, this, that, the other. No, money in politics is bad. That's what you should always say if you are someone like Agwan. And I think that is a very, very powerful message. Huge respect to him. It's going to be very interesting to see how he does. Story will hopefully have good news to report in the future for sure. All right, now to our last story, this one in labor notes. The clock is ticking on the August 1st strike deadline of 340,000 UPS Teamsters. It would be the largest strike at a private employer in decades. People are actually paying attention to delivery driver Kiyomo Ferrero, a local 804 stop steward in New York City. Customers along her route stop her to say, I hope your negotiations are going well. The hosts are talking about it on Hot 97, the city's top hip-hop station. You know, when you hear it on Ebro in the morning, the Breakfast Club and all that, you know it's getting big. It's getting big out there. A deal still could avert a strike. As we went to press, the Teamsters announced the UPS had reached out to resume negotiations. The union bargaining team had dispersed 2 members home locals after talks broke down on July 5th for practice picketing that is put on display just how ready to strike the UPSers are. Already, though, the Teamsters have won tentative agreements to end 2-tier pay and a forced sixth-day work for drivers. So, getting another day off there on the weekends, pretty big. Installing air conditioning and new delivery trucks, making the MLK Day a paid holiday, eliminate driver-facing surveillance cameras, and curtail the subcontracting of feeder work. But negotiations are stalled on the top economic issues. Front and center are the union's demand to raise the pay of part-time workers who do the most unseen work in the warehouse, sorting, loading, and unloading parcels at a back-breaking pace, Amazon style, with the apps and all that stuff. It's all becoming Amazonized, I guess you could say. While supervisors are scrutinizing and hassling them. The major sticking points are money and a better quality of life for part-timers, said the shop steward Ferrero. They are 60% of the workforce. It's not just about the brown shirt and the truck, she said. It was a very interesting point, that I think a lot of people really just do not know. And this is not going to be like if one Starbucks store, went out on a strike, obviously, all respect to them, but this would cost UPS $170 million a day. Competitors could only absorb a fraction of the 20 million daily packages, and the 3,300 UPS pilots, represented by an independent union, have pledged they will not cross Teamster strike lines. So if they get out, no planes are flying. If UPS chooses to strike themselves because they're greedy and they're loyal to Wall Street, not Main Street, they will throw this country into recession, said Teamster President Sean O'Brien at a rally in Long Island a few days ago. The profound seriousness of the strike threat, light years from the dynamic of the 2018 bargaining, is why the Teamsters have won so much already, because they know they are serious. If they reach a deal by the deadline, this will be the reason why that UPS knew, Wall Street knew, and the workers knew. Everybody knew how ready they were to walk before the company would use a strike against us to scare us, said Carlos Silva, a full-timer in Gardena, California. If you don't have this contract, you'll go on strike. Now, it's the reverse. We're using it against them. That's a hell of a tool to have. Part-timers' starting pay rate has crawled up to just $8 an hour in 1982 to just $15.50 today, augmented in some areas with market rate adjustments. Preloader Damien Kungle in Canton, Ohio, works from 4 a.m. to 9 a.m., then delivers food for Instacart in the afternoon, racking up 12-hour days. His wage is less than the starting pay at Amazon or Subway, he says. He stays for the Teamster negotiated health insurance and pension, but he needs a second job because of the short hours and low wages. I can't pay my rent, he says, on $16.65. CEO Carol Tomei, though, earned $27.6 million in 2021, 548 times meeting UPS worker pay. The inside workforce is overwhelmingly part-timers, who are, again, these are people who are not, kind of out on the trucks, but people who are sorting packages in the factories, who are guaranteed just 3.5 hours a shift, though not for lack of work. Supervisors send part-timers home and finish the work themselves, even though Teamsters will grieve it and UPS will pay out triple-time penalties. Why? For the numbers, Silva says. UPS is a numbers company. Supervisors get their bonuses based on keeping work hours down. So if they, just send a part-timer who relies on this work for money to put food on their tables home, they'll get a bonus, and the worker will get out with less money. Also, that they just have to put in a few packages before they go home at the end of the day. The supervisors will. So supervisors exert apparently tyrannical control, posting schedules late, screwing up payroll, threatening to fire you, or just standing there staring at you for 20 minutes while you race to unload a trailer at the mandated speed of about 1,000 packages an hour. That's scary. It's 1,000 packages an hour. Jesus Christ. She often urges members to request a team lift This is Jenny Beckenstein, a shop steward in Los Angeles. She said she often urges members to request a team lift if a package weighs more than 70 pounds. They're right under the union contract, but some people would rather just deal with the heavy box than with the supervisor yelling at you. So preloaders are heaving 150-pound boxes in sweltering heat without nearly enough fans. They want to give a heavy slap on the wrist, take time away from the people, money away, said delivery driver Daryl Pace of Local 413 of Columbus, Ohio. It's a militaristic style of discipline. UPS can afford to do better, especially now. The company has raked in exorbitant profits since the pandemic, while UPSers endured greater hazards, leaner staffing, and more intense speed-up pressure than ever, made $13.1 billion in operating profit from 2022, up from $7.8 billion in 2019. How did the Teamsters get to this powerful spot? Well, it has been because of new leadership. Teams for a Democratic Union won the 2021 election 2-1, closing the book on a long concessionary reign of James P. Hoffa. O'Brien made his campaign a theme of his willingness, even enthusiasm, to strike UPS. His administration has worked reversed the Hoffa-era brownouts on bargaining updates, and made a UPS Teamsters app. The International Union encouraged members' participation in the contract campaign and gave locals and members the tools to mobilize themselves. Campaign kickoff rallies, contract unity pledge cards, and MLK deliver on the dream actions, including practice picketing as well. So it's they really have been giving them, keeping them interested, keeping them, because it's like you go home, you do your job, you're not really going to be thinking about your union, unless it's like right before a strike, or unless they're really bombarding you with a lot of stuff to do, and keeping you interested, keeping you engaged, which again works, in my opinion at least, to everyone's benefit in the end. TDU, Teamsters for a Democratic Union, was an accelerant, networking Teamsters together, spreading the contract campaign, and training new activists on how to implement it. When the campaign went on, more and more members and locals jumped in. TDU webinars swapped info and ideas, and participants grew from 500 to 1,500 to 5,000. By the time talks broke down, the practice picketing tactic had spread nationwide. In February, second-tier drivers in Local 542 in San Marcos, California, started organizing weekly breakfast meetings before their shift to talk about the contract fight. They called themselves the Strike Force. Part-timers have a separate meeting after work since their shifts don't align. To bring the groups together, they organized a barbecue. The best thing we've done so far, said Abel De La Cruz. Drivers helped pitch in for raffle prizes, for food. Everyone brought their own tables and chairs to help set up at a local park. It's been life-changing for me personally. Before this, I wouldn't talk to anybody. I was a very shy person. Now I'm out going and giving speeches at barbecues and at rallies. It's really changed the attitude in my warehouse. This is one of the workers there talking. This, I think it's actually an anonymous quote from Labor Notes. But yeah, it's just a worker there. It's really changed the attitude in my warehouse. Before, it was a go in, do your work, get out kind of deal, You might say hi to a couple people, but through this movement, we've all been able to get to know each other a whole lot better. In Ohio, with support from TDU, Congo, and Pace, preempted the company's divide and conquer tactics by launching a joint petition. Part-timers pledged to support a key demand of full-time drivers, which is increasing the UPS contribution to the Central Regional Pension Fund, and the drivers will get part-timers' demand for $25 an hour and more full-time jobs. This is really, really some incredible stuff. South solidarity coming together, working well, and it's really, really impressive stuff. We have people talking to people. We have Teamsters teaching Teamsters. This TDU organization, this caucus within the Teamster movement has spread really through word of mouth. They've meant, we have these, classes being held about how to be a steward, how to get people together, how to, negotiate a contract, how to join your union or your local union's kind of bargaining team. And all this stuff is incredibly empowering because people, want to get involved in ways that are actually going to be affected in, changing to them, because really, very few people have, real good experience with politics and interacting in ways that, with political systems that can actually change things for them. And this is one of the ways they can actually do it. Really, really cool to see. And a fraction of the Teamsters still working today. We're part of the last nationwide UPS strike in 1997, but Alano De La Rosa was one of them. He had just started a part-time loader with Local 90 in Des Moines. Still, as the strike itself was, the energy that people had afterwards, he says, was bigger. Last August, so the contract campaign kicked off with parking lot rallies marking a quarter century since the landmark strike. De La Rosa, still a steward and part-timer, organized a rally as part of a group of members looking to revitalize Local 90. We took it on ourselves to get the message out and start building the momentum, showing that we're so united so the company can't divide it and conquer us. They know they have to take us seriously. The contract activities dovetailed with their campaign offer, talking with members, distilling the issues. His slate won, and now De La Rosa is now the principal officer. Since January, the new leaders have cleared a backlog of hundreds of grievances and revived turnout at monthly meetings where trainings are now offered. They're visiting every shop once a month and making sure the union hall stays open during business hours. The roots of this groundswell go far back, as rank and filers built a network of resistance through the dismal Hoffa years. After membership surveys, Teamster leaders would always come back and say, well, the members told us they want their pension and health care protected. That's what we did, remembers Greg Kerwood, a 19-year package and car driver and steward of Somerville, Massachusetts. Their argument was sort of a victory by lack of a loss. For those of us who actually wanted to improve our lives, it was endless disappointment. In 2013, with the DDU's help, a Vote No movement grew to resist a bad deal at UPS. This fueled the first Teamsters United election campaign in 2016, which lost but came within a hair of unseating Hoffa, showing it could be done. It wasn't long after that O'Brien broke ranks with Hoffa. In the 2018 contract, which turned out to be even worse, creating a lower paid second tier of drivers, this time it was voted down by 54%, and union leaders found a constitutional loophole to impose it anyway, which is a really kind of exciting moment, and probably the biggest reason why Sean O'Brien won this campaign and is able to take these workers out on strike if things don't go according to plan this upcoming week. I can still remember vividly hearing the vote totals and watching Facebook light up like a Christmas tree when everyone's shouting, "We did it, we did it, we did it," Kerwood said. UPS came out with a statement almost immediately saying they understood and were willing to go back to the table. But amid the euphoria, Dennis Taylor, who's the lead negotiator, literally said in the same sentence, 2/3 of the people didn't vote, so therefore the contract was ratified. That's where it all flipped, Kerwood said. We're going to be proactive and not reactive anymore. We are going to change the Constitution and change the leadership and change the approach. And that is clearly what they did. So really, really cool stuff about this union who had been beaten up by concessionary business unionism from this, really no good, as Jimmy Hoffa, I believe that guy's dad, says in The Irishman, one thing you can't trust in this life is kids of millionaires, or something like that. Well, that certainly seems to be pretty true, pretty prophetic. And it really seems like his son has his son's evil influence on the Teamsters has finally broken away, and they're preparing for a gangbuster last few weeks of negotiations leading up to the end of the month and the strike. That's all the time we got for you guys today. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been Newsflash.